What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. The incursion by Ukrainian forces into Russia's Kursk region showed total absence of reaction by the people of Russia. This event, which could have sparked widespread patriotic unity, or at least a significant public debate, has instead been met with an unusual apathy. The muted reaction of the Russian population to what should have been a national crisis is not only questionable, but also indicative of deeper societal issues, and such political and societal problems became increasingly apparent recently. However, in the last couple of weeks, the Ukrainian progress inside Kursk region slowed down significantly, so I think it is a perfect time to summarize everything that has happened and changed over the last 30 days, which political issues of Putin's regime have been revealed, the response by the people of Russia, and the long-term consequences for Russia and this war. It has now been almost the whole month since Ukrainian troops crossed the Russian border into the Kursk region, a move that under different circumstances might have led to a surge of nationalistic sentiment. Historically, such invasions often trigger a rally-around-the-flag effect we talked about previously, where citizens unite in support of their government and military. However, in the response from the Russian public has been strikingly indifferent. Unlike previous events, such as Prigozhin's mutiny, which did stir some public reaction despite being a domestic affair, this foreign incursion has failed to ignite the usual passions. This lack of response can be attributed to a variety of factors. Firstly, many Russians appear to be disengaged from the political sphere, and it can be explained quite simply. For more than 2 decades, the Russian authorities always told the people, leave the matters and problems of the state to the state. Focus on work, family, have fun whenever you can, and the state will take care of its own problems. And slowly but surely, the people of Russia became more and more distant from state's affairs. The feeling of, I'm just a one person, my vote or input, it means nothing. It is extremely strong in Russia, this feeling. If you ask a regular Russian which law or reform was adopted recently, he or she will most likely not be able to answer this question. When the government makes the decision, they don't ask people. They just present the final solution as a matter of fact. This already happened. This law was adopted. This is how it's going to be moving forward. And Russians just accept those things as a background noise, not even trying to understand or realize what's happening or why this particular change had to be made. Since 2014, it even became widely unpopular and uncool to be in opposition. The government made sure that those people are seen as freaks and agents of the West. They were routinely making fun of them in propaganda and in the news even. So eventually, if you are trying to change something or speak against the regime, people look at you like you're almost a joke. Like, why bother? Why are you always so unhappy? Why do you care so much? What's the even point of trying? Don't you have a roof over your head and food on your table? Just keep your mouth shut and enjoy your quiet life. That's a perfect description of life for the last 10 years, and this sentiment became even stronger since war started. So obviously, despite the enormity of the events such as the incursion of a foreign country's army into the Russian territory, it has not shaken people from their routines and prompted any significant increase in interest in national affairs. Even the government's attempts to frame the invasion as a horrible act by a malevolent enemy, even this failed to resonate with the general public, though mostly it was just the Russian propaganda. It was mostly the Russian propagandists talking about the incursion. The state media just briefly touched the issue as something that, just unfortunately it happened. We didn't do anything, it just happened. Another reason for this apathy may be the cumulative effect of the past 30 months of conflict and turmoil. The constant barrage of distressing news and ongoing war have led to a kind of emotional numbness among the population. The best example is when the very first attacks against Russian oil refineries happened. They were always making breaking news on Russian TV. Now, such events are barely even mentioned at all, almost like daily weather forecasts. People listen to them, they take them into consideration, but they barely react. This phenomenon, when people become indifferent to violence and tragedy, is not uncommon in prolonged conflicts. The sheer volume of suffering has become so overwhelming that it is no longer provoking the strong reactions it once did. The psychological toll of the prolonged conflict cannot be underestimated. The Russian public has been living under the shadow of war for an extended period, and this has inevitably led to a complex array of emotional responses. Many people are experiencing what can be described as trauma-induced dissociation, a state where the mind, overwhelmed by stress and fear, shuts down emotionally. This coping mechanism, while protective in the short term, results in a diminished capacity to process new information or to even engage with the unfolding events in a meaningful way. This separation is compounded by cognitive dissonance, where individuals struggle to reconcile their beliefs with the reality they're facing. The war has created a moral and ethical quagmire for many Russians, who find themselves torn between supporting their country and opposing the violence being perpetrated in its name. These internal conflicts lead to a paralysis of thought and action, where people choose to avoid thinking about the war altogether, rather than confront the uncomfortable truths it presents. Additionally, the sheer size of Russian territory contributes to this detachment. For many, the war remains a distant event, occurring in regions that are far removed from their everyday lives. The names of places like Kursk, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Kherson, Mykolaiv, or even Belgorod might as well be foreign to them, as they struggle to connect these locations with their own reality. This geographic and emotional distance further alienates the public from the war, making it easier for them to remain indifferent. Perhaps the most concerning aspect of the current situation is the normalization of the crisis. The invasion of the Kursk region, which in any other context would be a cause for national alarm, has barely registered with the broader population. Within days, the incursion dropped out of the public's consciousness, overshadowed by other, more trivial events. This happened as a result of society being worn down by years of conflict and propaganda. This societal fatigue has significant implications for the future as well. A population that is disengaged and apathic is less likely to rally in support of the government, especially in times of crisis. This makes the regime more vulnerable to external pressures and internal dissent. Furthermore, this apathy could also impact the country's ability to respond to future challenges, both domestic and international. If the public no longer cares about the integrity of the nation's borders, it raises questions about what, if anything, could galvanize them into action. Another significant factor contributing to the public's lack of response is the government's handling of the situation. From the very beginning, the authorities seemed unprepared and even indifferent to the struggles of those directly affected by the incursion. The residents of Kursk, many of whom were forced to flee their homes, were initially treated as an inconvenience, rather than the citizens in need of urgent assistance. This disregard for their well-being was only slightly tempered by a half-hearted evacuation effort, which did little to inspire confidence or loyalty among the population. Moreover, the government's focus during this crisis has been strange, to say the least. Rather than rallying the nation or launching a comprehensive rescue and support operation, they have concentrated on preparing for the upcoming draft campaign. Just think about it. The emphasis has been on convincing mothers to send their sons to the front lines, with propaganda efforts aimed more at stoking pride than addressing the immediate needs of those affected by the conflict. This disconnect between the government's priorities and the people's needs has likely contributed to the public's disillusionment and disengagement. The propaganda machine, usually so effective in shaping public's opinion, has also failed. Instead of evoking sympathy or outrage, the government's messaging has been met with a shrug. This is partly because the imagery and rhetoric used to depict the situation in Kursk have been surprisingly calm, unlike the graphic descriptions of war that previously stirred strong emotions. The current portrayal of the conflict seems muted, showing orderly evacuations and some kind of relatively neutral interviews. In comparison to the horrific scenes that have become almost a routine over the past 2 years, the events in Kursk almost appear quote-unquote normal. One of the most interesting observations from the events in the Kursk region is the speed and decisiveness with which the local population fled the region itself. In the town, for example, of Sudzha, which has not been yet completely destroyed, only a fraction of its population remains. There are estimates which suggest that anywhere between 2 and 10% of the town's 5,000 residents are still there, a stark contrast to other conflict zones, primarily in Ukraine, where civilians often remain until the very end, despite the dangers. This rapid exodus revealed a deep-seated distrust in the government's ability to protect its citizens. Unlike in previous crises, where forced evacuations were often chaotic and incomplete, the residents of Sudzha took matters literally into their own hands. They did not wait for government's organized evacuations. Instead, they acted independently, recognizing that their safety was not a priority for the authorities. This behavior underscores a broader realization among the Russian population that the government is more concerned with maintaining its image and control than the well-being of its own people. The mentality of every man for himself has become not just a cultural norm, but a surviving strategy in a country where the government is seen as indifferent to the fate of its citizens. This development marks a significant shift in the relationship between the Russian government and its people. The trust that once existed, however tenuous, has been eroded to the point where the population no longer looks to the state for protection or leadership, obviously mostly in times of the crisis. Another critical conclusion from the Kursk incursion is the emergence of regional autonomy in response to the crisis. The local government in Kursk has begun organizing its own defense efforts, recruiting volunteers and forming battalions independent of the federal military structure. This shift towards regional self-reliance is unprecedented in a country that has long been characterized by its hyper-centralized government. Historically, Russia's central government has maintained tight control over all aspects of governance, often literally micromanaging even the smallest local issues. However, the current situation in Kursk reveals a significant departure from this norm. The regional authorities are now tasked with defending their own territories, and they are doing so by offering short-term contracts and financial incentives to potential volunteers. This approach reflects a pragmatic understanding of the realities on the ground. The federal government is too preoccupied with other fronts to provide the necessary support, leaving the region to fend for itself. However, there is a glimmer of hope in this bleak landscape. Despite the government's best efforts, the Russian people have not fully embraced the narrative of Ukrainians as the enemy. For many, the conflict is still seen as a tragic and unnecessary struggle between two very closely related nations, rather than a battle against an implacable foe. This lingering sense of shared humanity could be key to fostering a more peaceful and constructive approach to resolving the conflict. At the same time, the opposition, which has struggled to present a united front, now faces an opportunity to capitalize on the government's missteps. While it is true that the opposition is fragmented and often at odds with itself, the common desire to end the war and prevent further loss of life could serve as a rallying point. The challenge will be to transcend the personal and ideological differences and to focus on the broader goal of peace and reconciliation. The widespread apathy and disillusionment that characterize Russian society today could pave the way for future change. The public's disengagement from the government, while problematic in the short term, also means that they are not deeply invested in the current regime. This detachment could make it easier for a new leadership to emerge, one that is capable of addressing the real needs and concerns of the population. The fact that regional governments are beginning to take matters into their own hands suggests that there is a growing recognition that the central government cannot be relied upon. This could lead to a more decentralized and flexible political system, one that is better equipped to deal with the diverse challenges facing the country. While this shift towards regional autonomy is fraught with risks, it also presents an opportunity for regions to develop more responsive and effective governance structures. Well, there you have it, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below, PayPal donations, Patreon subscriptions for bonus content, and there is also the Russian Dude merch. All the useful links are down below. Thanks so much for watching. See you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in